All right, welcome back. We've made it to the final and honestly, maybe the most critical phase of the CPMAI methodology, Phase 6, Operationalization and Governance. Now, you might think this is the end of the road, but this is where things get really interesting. This is the moment your AI model stops being a project and becomes a living, breathing part of your business. So let's dive into what happens after you hit that big deploy button.
So picture this. You've done all the hard work, right? The data's been prepped, the model's been trained, and it is finally out there, deployed. The temptation is to just, dust off your hands, call it a day, and move on to the next big thing. But I have to ask you, is the project really over? Well, if you're following the CPMAI framework, the answer is a big, resounding no. In fact, what you've just done is kick off the most critical phase of your model's entire life. You got to think about it this way. Deployment isn't the finish line, it's the starting gun. And for that model to actually survive and thrive out in the wild, it's going to need a serious ongoing support system. And that brings us right to our first big topic, governing your model. This is all about turning that model from a static project asset into a real live operation. Think of governance as the dedicated support team for your new AI product, keeping it running and delivering value day in and day out. So what is this really? The CPMAI methodology calls it a model governance framework, and it's basically a formal structure for making decisions. We're not just talking about fixing bugs here. We're talking about how you'll handle modifications, decide on its future uses, and, this is the big one, how you're going to listen to and act on feedback from actual real-world users. Without a structure like this, your model is pretty much flying blind. And who runs this framework? A dedicated governance team. And they have some very clear responsibilities. First up, they are the owners of the model. The buck stops with them. They also take responsibility for how it's used, which means they're the ones actively seeking feedback and fielding any questions or concerns that pop up. They are, in a very real sense, the human face of the AI, and that's absolutely crucial for building trust. Okay, so how does this team actually work? It's a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, they proactively solicit feedback. They don't just sit around and wait for complaints to roll in. Next, they evaluate those concerns. They're trying to figure out, okay, is this a minor bug, a user training issue, or is this pointing to a much bigger problem? And finally, they take action. That could be anything from a small tweak to raising a red flag and saying, hey, we might need a whole new iteration of this thing. And that last point, the need for a new iteration, is the perfect segue to our next section. Once your model's up and running and you're getting all that feedback, the next big question is, what's next? Are we going to evolve this thing or just repeat what we've done? It's a classic dilemma, right? After the big launch, how do you decide what's next? Do you pour more resources into making the current model even better? Or do you say, you know what, it's good enough for now, and shift your focus to other priorities? This can't just be a gut decision, it needs a structured approach. And that's where the CPMA methodology gives us a formal task called Determine Next Steps. The whole point is to force the team to just pause, take a breath, look at the evidence, and make a conscious, intentional decision about the model's future. It's about shifting from just reactive support to proactive evolution. And this really comes down to weighing the trade-offs. On the one hand, a new iteration might significantly boost your KPIs or could address some crucial user feedback. But the against side is just as real. Maybe you have a limited budget, or the current model is actually good enough. And of course, there are always other high-priority projects waiting in the wings. So you can see this is a strategic business decision, not just a technical one. Okay, so we're governing the model. We're planning for its future, but there's one final, absolutely essential step in this whole phase. We have to look back. We need to conduct a proper project post-mortem to capture all the lessons we've learned along the way. I love this quote from the CPMAI framework because it's so direct. Assess what went right and what went wrong, what was done well, and what should be improved. Now, this isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's all about honest reflection to make sure the next project is even more successful. The output of this review isn't just a bunch of random meeting notes. It's a formal artifact called experience documentation. This is where you write down all the good stuff, the pitfalls, the dead-end approaches you tried, and all the clever hints and tricks the team discovered. For the next team that comes along, this document is organizational gold. And here's a simple but really powerful way to structure that discussion. What went well? Let's celebrate it. Maybe your data pipeline was incredibly efficient. What went wrong? Be honest. Maybe the initial business objectives were a little fuzzy, which caused rework later. And most importantly, what should be improved? This connects the problem to a concrete action.
So if you hit deployment hurdles with IT, the improvement is simple. Get IT involved way earlier next time.
And that's really the whole point. This final report, this experience documentation, it's not a bookend for this project. It's a playbook. It's the starter kit you hand to the next AI project team, giving them a massive head start and helping the entire organization get smarter with every single project. So I'll leave you with this. When you truly embrace governance, plan your next steps, and learn from the past, you completely change the definition of a project's end. It stops being a conclusion and becomes the foundation for long-term success. So you have to ask yourself, is your project's ending truly the start of its success?